He wasn't supposed to matter to me that way. He was my brother, the one person the world said I should never even think about, let alone feel this for. But desire doesn't ask for permission, and shame doesn't keep it from growing. That night, when everything blurred between right and wrong, I realized I'd already crossed a line I could never uncross. And if I'm honest, I didn't want to stop. Summer has a way of distorting time. The days felt longer than they were, stretched thin by the heat, as though the air itself had slowed down. I remember telling myself that summer would be uneventful, predictable even. I was wrong. When I moved back into the house, I thought of it as a pause button. My college dorm had been stripped bare, my suitcase barely closed, and suddenly I was here again, standing in the same room where I had taped posters to the wall years ago. The corners of those posters were still faintly visible on the paint, shadows of my younger self. The carpet had the same stubborn stain from when we spilled orange soda in 8th grade. Everything felt too familiar. And he was here, my brother. It wasn't as though I hadn't expected him. Of course I had. But the realization that we would be sharing this space again was heavier than I admitted. He wasn't just a boy who once teased me until I cried. He wasn't just a person who stole my headphones and forgot to return them. He was older now. So was I. And the world between us had shifted in ways I didn't want to name. Daily life routines. I got a summer job at the cafe downtown. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even good money. My hair would smell like burnt coffee beans long after I left, and the sticky sweetness of syrups clung to my skin no matter how many times I washed. But the job gave me structure, and maybe that was enough. Each morning, I'd wake to the sound of birds outside my window and the feign of the fan that never cooled the room enough. My routine was simple. Shower, throw on a navy blue polo uniform, tie my hair back, and hope no one I knew came in for coffee. By the time I got home, afternoons had melted into heavy golden light. The curtains trapped the heat, making the house feel more like an oven than a home. I'd usually collapse onto the couch, eyes half shut, and there he'd be, lounging like he owned the space, scrolling endlessly on his phone or tossing a ball against the wall. Our arguments remained small, petty. Who finished the last soda? It's your turn to take out the trash. Stop leaving your shoes in the hallway. We'd bicker, laugh 5 minutes later, and then slip back into an odd kind of quiet. Subtle shifts. But things didn't feel the same anymore. Not really. When we were kids, his presence was just noise, background static in my life. Now, though, I was noticing the details. His voice had dropped deeper than I remembered. His frame filled the doorway differently. He tugged at the hem of his shirt absent-mindedly when he was lost in thought. These weren't the sorts of things I should have been paying attention to. I knew that, but awareness doesn't always ask for permission. I tried to bury it beneath the ordinary rhythm of summer. But then, late one night after closing shift, I found him sitting outside on the porch. The neighborhood was hushed, cicadas buzzing like static in the air. He didn't notice me at first, eyes tilted toward the sky. "What are you looking at?" I asked, startling him. He glanced at me, then back at the stars. Nothing, just the sky. I sat down beside him. The wood of the porch was still warm beneath us. Silence stretched, but it wasn't awkward, it was full, heavy with something unnamed.
Flashbacks.
Memories of our childhood surfaced more often than I wanted them to. The time he barged into my room without knocking, grinning as I screamed at him. The time he stole my headphones and pretended not to know where they were, only to give them back weeks later. How he teased me until I cried at 12 years old, and how he tried, awkwardly, clumsily, to apologize afterward with a lopsided drawing. Back then, those moments were just annoyances, the typical fights of siblings trapped in the same house. But revisiting them now, they looked different. They weren't just annoyances. They were proof of how entangled we'd always been. And somehow that made me uneasy.
Subtle chemistry.
There were moments when I felt it, something like static in the air. One afternoon, I reached for a glass in the kitchen cabinet at the same time he did. Our hands brushed. It should have been nothing, but I jerked back too quickly. Cheeks hot. He noticed. Of course he noticed. His mouth tilted into the faintest smile before he looked away. Another time, I came downstairs half asleep, wearing just an oversized t-shirt. His gaze caught me before he turned sharply away, but not soon enough. My stomach knotted, and for the rest of the day, I carried a memory like a stone in my chest. I told myself I was imagining it, that maybe I was lonely, that maybe the summer heat was making me restless. But deep down, I knew better. The days kept folding into one another, as if summer itself wanted to trap me in repetition. Morning shifts, tired afternoons, late evenings filled with silence or half-hearted conversations. On the surface, it was all the same. But underneath, I felt the ground shifting. I'd find myself noticing things I shouldn't. The way his laugh had changed. It wasn't the careless sound of childhood anymore. It was deeper, sometimes edged with a roughness that sent heat crawling under my skin. The way he ran his hand through his hair absent-mindedly when he was focused, or the way he leaned back in a chair, stretching as though the space belonged to him. It was stupid, dangerous. But once you start noticing, you can't unsee.
Morning friction.
One morning, I stumbled into the kitchen half awake, hair a mess, eyes barely open. He was already there, pouring cereal into a bowl. "You look like death," he said casually, glancing at me. "Thanks," I muttered, reaching for the fridge. I poured myself a glass of orange juice, and as I set it down, his hand brushed against mine when he slid the milk carton across the counter. Just for a second, barely long enough to matter, but I froze. He didn't move away immediately. His fingers lingered a fraction longer than they should have. His eyes flicked to mine, sharp, searching, before he pulled back like nothing had happened. It was nothing, just an accident. That's what I told myself. But the silence afterward stretched, sticky and uncomfortable.
The weight of old memories.
Later that day, I lay in my room, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun lazily. My mind kept replaying old memories, uninvited. I remembered the time we built a blanket fort in the living room when we were 10 and 12, how we argued over who got which blanket, who got to be in charge, how we ended up laughing so hard the fort collapsed on us, and our parents told us to clean up the mess. I remembered the awkward stage of middle school when I wanted nothing more than to escape the house. He'd tease me endlessly about the way I straightened my hair, the music I listened to, the way I scribbled in notebooks. At the time, I thought it was cruelty. Now, looking back, I wondered if it had just been his way of watching me grow up. The memories weren't supposed to matter. They were supposed to remind me that this, whatever I thought I was feeling, was impossible. But instead, they made it harder to ignore how tightly woven our lives had always been.
Late night tension.
That evening, I returned home from work later than usual. The cafe had been slammed, and my feet ached from hours of standing. When I walked through the door, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I found him in the living room, stretched across the couch, the glow of the TV flickering across his face. He looked up when I entered, and something about his expression made my chest tighten. "You're late," he said, voice casual but with an edge I couldn't place. "Yeah, busy night." I dropped my bag by the stairs. "You didn't have to wait up." Didn't say I was waiting. But the way he looked at me, eyes lingering, heavy, told me otherwise. I sat on the opposite end of the couch, putting space between us that felt both necessary and unbearable. The room was filled with the low hum of whatever show he had on, but I couldn't focus on the screen. Every movement he made pulled at the corners of my awareness. The way he stretched, the faint smell of his cologne, the sound of his breath in the quiet. At one point, our eyes met. Just a glance, just a second too long. I looked away first, heart pounding.
Rationalizations.
I told myself it was in my head, that maybe I was lonely, maybe I was projecting feelings where none existed. People see what they want to see, don't they? But then there were the small signs I couldn't explain away. The way his voice softened when he spoke to me. The way his hand would brush mine a little too often in the kitchen. The way his silence sometimes felt like words unsaid. I knew it wasn't safe to think about. I knew what the world would say. "He's your brother." The phrase alone was enough to make my stomach twist with guilt. And yet, desire doesn't vanish just because it's forbidden. It grows stronger in the shadows.
The storm.
The turning point came on a night when the weather itself seemed unsettled. Dark clouds had gathered in the afternoon, thick and restless. By evening, the storm broke loose, rain slamming against the windows, thunder shaking the air. I was curled up on the couch, a blanket pulled around me, trying to distract myself with the TV. He sat beside me, closer than usual, the space between us charged with something I couldn't name. The power flickered once, then again, and then, with a final crack of thunder, the lights went out. The house fell into darkness, except for the brief, violent flashes of lightning that illuminated his face in sharp relief. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear his breathing, steady but heavier than usual. My pulse echoed in my ears. I reached for my phone, but my hand brushed his arm instead. The contact was accidental, fleeting, but in the darkness, it felt amplified. Neither of us pulled away. That night, the air between us thickened with everything unspoken. It wasn't a confession, it wasn't an act. It was a pause, a suspended moment in time that whispered of something inevitable. And as the storm raged outside, I realized with shiver that we had crossed into dangerous territory. The morning after the storm, the house smelled of damp wood. The windows were streaked with rain, and puddles shimmered on the driveway. It should have felt like any other morning, safe, ordinary, but the silence between us carried the weight of something neither of us wanted to name. I'd busied myself in the kitchen, pouring cereal, rinsing dishes that didn't need rinsing. He walked in, hair still messy from sleep, his t-shirt clinging to his shoulders. I felt my body tense at the sound of his footsteps, and I hated myself for it. "Power's back," he said, reaching for a glass. His voice was casual, but it hung between us, heavier than it should have. "Yeah." My reply was too sharp, too quick. We moved around each other in the kitchen like strangers in a crowded hallway, careful not to collide but acutely aware of how close we were. Each time his arm brushed mine, I pulled away as though burned.
Flashback, a different kind of glance.
Later, when I tried to push away the unease, my mind dragged me back to a memory I hadn't thought about in years. It was 2 summers ago, before I left for college. We were both at a family barbecue, the backyard filled with laughter and the smell of grilled corn. I remember catching his eyes on me across the crowd, just for a moment. It wasn't the playful, teasing glance of a brother. It was sharper, more searching, as though he was seeing me differently for the first time. I had looked away quickly, but the memory clung to me afterward. At the time, I told myself I imagined it, that maybe he'd been staring at nothing. But now, replaying it with fresh eyes, I wasn't so sure.
Daily life, tension underneath.
The summer dragged on, each day ordinary on the surface, but every interaction carried an edge. At breakfast, he'd pour himself coffee, and I'd watch the way his fingers curled around the mug. At dinner, he'd joke with our parents, his smile easy, but when his eyes flicked to mine, the laughter in my throat turned brittle. Sometimes he'd sit in the living room, sprawled across the couch, one arm resting behind his head. I'd catch myself staring too long, forcing myself to look away before he noticed. And yet, I could feel his gaze return the favor, brief, sharp, undeniable. The air in the house grew heavy, like humidity before another storm, a confession in silence. One evening, I walked into the living room and found him asleep on the couch. His chest rose and fell steadily, his face softened in sleep. The TV flickered quietly, casting faint light across his features. I should have left him there, gone upstairs, ignored the strange tug in my chest. But instead, I stood there longer than I should have, watching him. In that moment, I admitted a truth I hadn't dared put into words. I didn't just notice him. I wanted him. The guilt hit immediately after, like cold water. The words, "he's your brother," echoed in my head, sharp enough to cut. But the feeling didn't disappear. It sat heavy inside me, dangerous and undeniable. Guilt and rationalizations. I tried to fight it with logic. "You're just lonely," I told myself. "You've been back home too long, trapped in the same walls. You're projecting. You're imagining things that aren't there." But then came the moments that broke my excuses apart. Like the time he reached across me to grab something from the counter, his arm brushing against me, his breath close enough to stir the hair at my neck. He didn't move away immediately. Neither did I, or the time he offered me his hoodie when I complained about the evening chill. I slipped it on, and the faint scent of him clung to the fabric. I wore it longer than I needed to, pretending I'd forgotten, when in truth I didn't want to take it off. A subtle shift. The distance between us shrank without either of us acknowledging it. We weren't crossing lines, not yet, but we were circling them, toes grazing the edge. At dinner, our knees brushed beneath the table. He didn't move away. Neither did I. In the hallway, we'd pass each other too closely, shoulders colliding lightly, a half-smile pulling at his lips as if he knew something I wouldn't admit. The house felt smaller every day, not because of its walls, but because of the weight of everything unspoken, foreshadowing change. One late afternoon, I found myself standing by the window, watching him outside. He was tossing a basketball in the driveway, the sun low enough to cast his shadow long and stretched. He looked older in that light, less like the boy I grew up with, more like someone I didn't recognize but couldn't look away from. When he glanced up, our eyes met through the glass. For a second, it felt like he could see everything I was trying to hide. Something twisted in my chest, equal parts fear and anticipation. I didn't know what was coming, not exactly, but I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that something was. The days that followed blurred into one another, but the awareness between us only sharpened. Every room in the house felt smaller, every silence louder. It wasn't what he said that unsettled me. It was what he didn't. One evening, after dinner, we ended up in the kitchen together, just the two of us. The others had gone out, the house unusually quiet. I was washing dishes, sleeves rolled to my elbows, while he leaned against the counter, sipping water from a glass. "You missed a spot," he teased, nodding toward the plate in my hand. I rolled my eyes, scrubbing harder. "Do you ever help or just stand there and critique?" He smirked. "Depends. I think I'm doing a good job supervising." The banter was familiar, easy on the surface, but underneath, it hummed with something heavier. When I set the plate down and reached for a towel, his hand brushed mine on the counter. Neither of us moved away. For a heartbeat, the kitchen was silent except for the dripping faucet. I could feel his gaze on me, hot and unrelenting. My breath caught in my throat. Then, just as suddenly, he stepped back, muttering, "I'll be in the living room," as though nothing had happened. The breaking point inside. When he left, I pressed my hands flat against the counter, trying to steady myself. My reflection in the darkened kitchen window looked back at me with wide, guilty eyes. This is wrong, I told myself. You're supposed to stop this before it starts. But the truth was, I didn't want to stop. Not really. That admission sat like a secret in my chest, thrumming with dangerous life. Flashback. The first time I knew. That night, lying in bed, my mind dragged me back again, this time to a smaller memory I'd buried. I was 15, he's 17. We were watching a movie on the couch, the kind of mindless comedy that usually had us laughing. At some point, my head had tipped onto his shoulder. I remember how still he went, how his breath seemed to change. I told myself it was nothing back then, just a fluke, just my imagination. But now, replaying it in the dark, I realized that was the first moment something unspoken had sparked. A spark that quietly smoldered all these years, waiting, a charged evening. A few nights later, the storm returned. Not as violent as the last, but steady, rain pattering against the roof, the air thick with electricity. We sat in the living room again, this time closer than usual. The excuse was innocent, sharing the same blanket because the air conditioner had gone out. Our shoulders brushed beneath the fabric, and neither of us shifted away. The TV played, but I couldn't tell you what was on. My focus was narrowed to the heat of his body beside mine, the awareness of every breath. At one point, our eyes met. Too close, too long. The flicker of something undeniable passed between us. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I looked away first, but the damage was done. Something had been acknowledged in that silence, even if neither of us spoke it aloud. The hint of change. Later, when I went upstairs, I paused at my bedroom door. For reasons I couldn't explain, I left it slightly ajar. The hallway was dark, the house quiet, but my chest buzzed with restless energy. It wasn't an invitation. At least, that's what I told myself. But deep down, I knew better. Because some part of me was waiting for the sound of his footsteps in the hall, waiting for the moment everything would finally break open. And as I lay in bed, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, I realized the truth. Normal was already gone. Something had shifted, and there was no going back. The first time it really crossed a line, it wasn't dramatic. There were no fireworks, no confessions whispered in the dark. It was quiet, small, almost accidental. And maybe that's why it shook me so deeply. The living room standoff. It was late. The house had gone to sleep hours ago. I couldn't. I tossed and turned in bed until finally giving up, padding downstairs for water. The kitchen light spilled dimly into the hall, and when I turned the corner, he was already there, leaning against the counter, glass in hand. "You couldn't sleep either?" His voice was low, almost conspiratorial, as though we were sharing a secret just by being awake. I shook my head, avoiding his eyes as I opened the fridge. No, too hot in my room. When I closed the door, he was closer, not alarmingly so, just close. Close enough that the hum of the refrigerator seemed suddenly deafening. For a moment, neither of us moved. The silence grew thick. His eyes flicked to mine, then away, then back again. My chest tightened. I brushed past him to grab a glass, but as I did, his hand grazed my wrist. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe it wasn't, but it was enough to stop me cold. We both froze, eyes locking. The touch was nothing. Barely there, a whisper of skin against skin. But my body reacted like I'd been struck by lightning. I pulled my hand back quickly, the glass trembling as I filled it with water. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just watched me, his expression unreadable, lips pressed into something between a smirk and a question. I drank too quickly, water spilling down my chin. I muttered, "Good night," and left before he could answer. But as I lay in bed afterward, my skin still tingled where his fingers had touched. The long stares. The days after that were worse. Because now I wasn't imagining it. Now I knew. Every glance carried weight. At breakfast, his eyes lingered too long across the table. In the living room, he'd watch me when he thought I wasn't looking. Even walking down the hall, I could feel his presence behind me, like gravity pulling me in. And sometimes I caught myself returning it. It was wrong. I told myself that 1,000 times. I told myself to look away, to keep busy, to bury myself in anything else. But then he'd smile that small, knowing smile, and the ground beneath me would tilt again. Almost seen. One afternoon, we were in the den watching TV. The others had gone out shopping, leaving us alone. I sat at one end of the couch, he at the other, but as the minutes stretched, we drifted closer. I don't remember who moved first. Maybe it was me, shifting slightly, or him leaning back. All I know is that suddenly our knees brushed, and neither of us pulled away. The show played on, forgotten. His hand rested on the cushion between us, fingers twitching slightly, as if resisting the urge to close the gap. Then, footsteps echoed in the hall. We jumped apart instantly, the space between us now a gulf. A second later, our mom walked in, asking if we wanted snacks from the store. We both answered too quickly, too brightly, and she didn't notice the way my cheeks burned. But I noticed the way his shoulders relaxed only after she left again. That was the moment I realized just how much danger there was. Not just emotional danger, but the risk of being seen, the risk of being known. And for reasons I didn't want to admit, that made it all the more intoxicating. The conversation that changed everything. It happened one night when the air was thick and restless, and neither of us could sleep. Again, we found ourselves in the living room, lights low, silence pressing in. He sat at one end of the couch, I at the other, the hum of the ceiling fan filling the space between us. After a long stretch of silence, he said, quietly, "You've been different lately." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, eyes fixed on the floor. "I don't know. You don't look at me the same. Or maybe you do, and I just notice it now." I wanted to deny it. I wanted to laugh it off. but the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I whispered, "You noticed too much." His head lifted, eyes locking with mine. There was no teasing in his expression, no smirk, just raw honesty. Maybe I noticed because I feel it too. The words sliced through the air, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. My chest heaved, my hands trembling against my knees. Before I could think, before I could stop myself, I whispered back, "I didn't mean to." His jaw tightened. Neither did I. The silence that followed was deafening. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to get up, to run upstairs, to end it before it spiraled further. But I didn't move. Neither did he. We just sat there, hearts pounding in rhythm, knowing we'd cross a line we could never uncross. The days after that conversation were unbearable. We didn't speak of it again, but the silence was louder than words. Every time we crossed paths in the hallway, brushed by each other in the kitchen, sat at the same table, it was there, hanging, heavy. I told myself to stay away. But the problem was I didn't want to. The brush of contact. One evening, the house was buzzing with relatives downstairs. Too much noise, too many questions, so I slipped away to my room. I thought I'd gone unnoticed, but a few minutes later, there was a quiet knock on the door. I opened it to find him standing there, expression unreadable. "Too loud?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, stepping back to let him in. He lingered near the doorway at first, as though testing invisible boundaries. Then, slowly, he sat on the edge of my bed. I stayed at my desk, pretending to scroll through my phone, though my hands shook. For a long time, we didn't speak. The muffled laughter of the family downstairs filled the silence between us. Then, without warning, he leaned back, letting himself fall across my bed like he owned the space. His arm brushed mine as he shifted, casual but deliberate. I froze. He didn't move away. Instead, he whispered, "Relax. I'm just tired." But there was nothing tired about the way his hand grazed mine on the blanket. Nothing tired about the way his eyes searched mine when I dared to glance over. My throat was dry. My pulse thundered. For a moment, the world shrank to just that point of contact. Skin to skin, buzzing, dangerous. And then, as if realizing he'd gone too far, he pulled back, sitting up straight. The distance between us was small, but suffocating. "I should probably get back downstairs," he muttered. But his eyes lingered one beat too long before he left.
The whisper of a kiss.
That night, I lay in bed wide awake, replaying the scene over and over. His weight on my mattress, his hand brushing mine, the way it felt like something unsaid had nearly spilled over. And then his footsteps. My door creaked open. I jolted upright, heart hammering, but it was only him again, standing in the shadows. "Can't sleep?" I whispered. He shook his head, stepping inside and shutting the door behind him. My chest constricted. This was no accident. He sat at the edge of my bed again, closer this time. The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow from the street lamp outside. His presence filled every corner of the space, thick and suffocating. We didn't speak. Words would have broken it. Instead, he leaned forward, so close I could feel the heat of his breath. My body locked, torn between terror and desire. His lips hovered inches from mine, not touching, just there, a silent question. And I, coward or accomplice, didn't move away. But then, just as quickly, he pulled back, running a hand through his hair. "I shouldn't," he muttered, voice hoarse. And before I could respond, he was gone. I sat there, trembling, lips tingling from a kiss that never landed. Shame and thrill. The next morning, everything looked the same. The house, the routine, the way sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor. But inside, nothing was the same. I avoided his eyes, yet sought them anyway. He acted normal, joking with the others, teasing me at breakfast. But beneath it all, there was something new, a secret thread binding us tighter. And with it came shame. Because every time I caught his gaze, my stomach twisted with guilt. I should have stopped it. I should have said something. But instead, I found myself wanting more. That was the part that scared me most. Almost caught. It happened a week later. We were in the living room. sitting closer than we should have been. Too close. A movie played, forgotten, while our knees brushed under blanket. I didn't pull away this time. Neither did he. Our fingers drifted closer on the cushion, until finally his pinky hooked mine. Barely a touch, but enough to send my heart racing. Then, footsteps on the stairs. We jumped apart, shoving the blanket off as though it burned. A second later, our cousin appeared, asking if either of us wanted popcorn. I stammered some excuse, my face hot, while he kept his gaze fixed firmly on the TV. Only after the cousin left did we exhale, shoulders slumping in unison. "That was close," he muttered under his breath. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The danger was too sharp, too real. But instead of scaring me off, it left me more entangled than ever. The question. Later that night, as we crossed paths in the hallway, he stopped me. "Can I ask you something?" His voice was low, careful. I swallowed hard. "What?" He hesitated, eyes darting down the hall to make sure it was empty. Then he leaned in just enough for only me to hear. "Do you want this too?" My heart slammed against my ribs. No one had ever asked me something so simple yet so impossible. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. He studied me for a beat, then gave a small, sad smile. That's what I thought. And then he walked away, leaving me stranded in the hallway, knees weak, pulse screaming. Because the truth was, I did want it, more than anything. And that was the very thing I couldn't admit. The air between us had become unbearable. Every glance was loaded, every silence louder than laughter. I caught myself memorizing the shape of his mouth when he spoke, the curve of his shoulders when he stretched, the casual way his shirt rolled up when he lounged on the couch. I hated myself for noticing, but I noticed everything. And worse, he noticed me noticing. The rain-soaked evening. It was late afternoon when the sky broke open. A storm rolled in fast, soaking the backyard in sheets of rain. Everyone else was downstairs, making jokes about the power going out. I retreated upstairs, needing the distance, needing space to breathe. But he followed. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. When I turned, he was in my doorway, hair damp from running the rain, shirt clinging to his chest. Something about the way he leaned against the frame, eyes searching mine, made my knees weak. "Storm's bad," he said casually, stepping inside. "Yeah." My voice cracked. I hated how obvious I was. He shut the door softly behind him. And just like that, the noise from downstairs felt a mile away. The first real touch. He came closer, slow, deliberate, until he was standing in front of me. For a second, he didn't move, just studied my face like he was memorizing it. Then his hand lifted hesitant, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. I froze. Every nerve lit up like lightning. "You're shaking," he whispered. "I'm not." I was. The moment stretched unbearable. Then he leaned in, so close I could see the raindrops on his eyelashes. And this time he didn't stop. His lips touched mine, light, tentative, trembling. It was nothing and everything all at once. A whisper of a kiss that shattered the fragile line we'd been tiptoeing for weeks. I didn't pull away. God help me, I leaned into it. The kiss deepened, still cautious but desperate, his hand sliding to the back of my neck. The storm outside roared, thunder shaking the walls, but all I felt was him, his warmth, his breath, his impossible closeness. When we finally broke apart, I was gasping, dizzy. "We can't." I choked out, though my body screamed otherwise. "I know," he whispered, forehead pressed to mine, "but tell me you don't want it." I couldn't. The spiral, the hours after blurred together. We avoided each other downstairs, acting like nothing had happened. But inside, I was unraveling. Every word, every glance carried the weight of that kiss. I kept replaying it in my mind, the softness of his lips, the way he trembled as much as I did. It should have been wrong. It was wrong. But instead of disgust, all I felt was longing and guilt, crushing, suffocating guilt. I found myself sneaking glances at him during dinner, at the way his jaw tensed when he chewed, at the vein in his neck when he laughed. It was like that kiss had stripped away the veil, making everything more vivid, more dangerous. I couldn't focus. I couldn't breathe. Almost seen. That night, I lay awake again. I told myself I wouldn't answer if he came. I told myself I would lock the door. But when it creaked open, I didn't move. He slipped inside, closing it behind him, and sat at the edge of my bed like before. His presence was overwhelming, yet comforting, like I'd been waiting for it. We didn't speak. Words were too heavy. Instead, his hand found mine under the blanket. And then, the sound of footsteps in the hallway. We froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. Shadows shifted under the door. Whoever was lingered, then slowly moved on. We didn't breathe until the sound faded. "That was close," he whispered, his lips inches from my ear. Too close. Too reckless. And yet, when he leaned in again, I didn't stop him. This kiss was deeper, hungrier, almost angry. It was messy and wrong and addictive. My hands clutched at his shirt, pulling him closer even as my mind screamed at me to push him away. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathless, I whispered the only thing I could manage. "This is going to destroy us." He looked at me, eyes dark, voice steady. "Maybe, but I can't stop." Neither could I. The night after that kiss, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. My reflection was a stranger, eyes rimmed with guilt, lips still burning from where his had been. I scrubbed my face, as if water could wash away desire. But it didn't. It only made me shiver with the memory. I told myself it was a mistake, that we could lock it away, bury it like it never happened. But then morning came, and one glance at him across the breakfast table shattered that fragile lie. He didn't look at me the same anymore. His gaze lingered too long, too heavy. Mine did too. The fight we didn't mean to have. It was supposed to be a normal day. Sunlight pouring in through the windows, everyone bustling around. But tension brewed underneath. He caught me alone in the hallway. "About last night," he began, voice low. "Don't." I cut in, harsher than I intended. "We can't talk about it." He flinched, jaw tightening. "So we just pretend nothing happened?" "Yes, but it did." His eyes burned into mine. "And you wanted it too." The words hit like a slap, because they were true, because I had no defense. "Stop." I whispered, almost pleading. "Please." His silence was heavier than any argument. He stepped back, but the damage was done. The truth was out between us, raw and undeniable. The unforgivable closeness. That night, I tried to stay in my room. I told myself I wouldn't let him in. But the storm outside raged louder than before, rattling the windows, shaking the house. And when his knock came, soft, almost desperate, I couldn't ignore it. He slipped inside. His hair was damp, his shoulders tense. "We can't keep doing this," I whispered. "Then tell me to go," he said. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, because I didn't want him to go. He crossed the room slowly, eyes locked on mine, until the space between us vanished. His hand cupped my cheek, his thumb trembling against my skin. And then he kissed me, harder than before, like he was tired pretending. This wasn't tentative or cautious. This was hunger, raw and consuming. My back hit the wall, his body pinning mine. Every nerve in me screamed with warning. But my hands betrayed me, pulling him closer, clinging like I'd drown without him. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was everything I'd feared and everything I craved. When he finally tore his lips from mine, we were both gasping. "This is wrong." I breathed. "Then why does it feel so right?" he shot back. I had no answer, only the sound of my heartbeat crashing in my ears. Almost caught. The universe, it seemed, wanted to remind us of the risk. Because at that exact moment, the door handle rattled. We froze, eyes wide, breath caught. "Hey, are you in there?" A voice called from the hall. It was a family member. Close enough that if they opened the door, everything would shatter. Panic surged through me. He pressed closer, holding me against the wall, both of us silent as statues. Seconds stretched like hours. Finally, the footsteps faded, the voice moving down the hall. The door never opened. We didn't move until the silence returned. That was too close. I whispered, heart still racing. His lips brushed against my ear. Maybe I don't care anymore. But I did. God, I did. And yet, I didn't push him away. The breaking of normal. After that night, everything was different. We couldn't go back to being just siblings in the same house. Every glance, every brush of fingers, every accidental touch burned with the memory of what we'd done. I caught myself staring when he laughed too freely. I caught him watching when I stretched or bent down. It was madness. Living on the same roof, pretending for everyone else while drowning in a secret that grew heavier each day. The guilt gnawed at me, but the desire only grew stronger. The betrayal of self. One evening, sitting together in the living room while everyone else was out, he broke the silence. I think about you all the time, he confessed quietly. My breath hitched. You can't say that. It's true. His voice was steady, his eyes locked on mine. I don't care if it's wrong. I don't care what anyone would say. I can't help it. I swallowed hard, tears stinging my eyes, because I felt the same. Because I wanted it too badly to deny. But hearing him say out loud, it broke something in me, because it wasn't just a kiss anymore. It wasn't just a storm or a moment of weakness. It was love, twisted, forbidden, unstoppable love. And that, I realized, was a real betrayal. Not of him, not of anyone else, but of myself. He walked into my room while I was asleep. I didn't hear the door creak at first. Didn't hear the footsteps on the carpet. What woke me was a shift in air, the weight of someone else's presence in the darkness. My eyes blinked open to a silhouette at the edge of my bed. For one wild heartbeat, I thought I was dreaming. But then he whispered my name. I froze. Don't be scared, he murmured, voice raw, almost broken. What are you doing? My voice cracked. He sat down slowly, the mattress dipping under his weight. The faint light from the window traced the edge of his face. Eyes shadowed, lips pressed tight. He looked torn apart, like he'd been wrestling with something for hours before giving in. I couldn't sleep, he admitted. His hands trembled against his knees. I keep hearing your voice in my head. I keep seeing you. My chest tightened. You shouldn't be here. I know. His eyes flicked to mine, desperate. But I can't stay away. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. My breath came shallow, my body taut with fear and longing. The space between. He reached for my hand. Slowly, tentatively, like he was afraid I'd pull away. I didn't. His fingers brushed mine, warm and shaking. The smallest contact, and yet it felt like the ground shifted beneath us. This is dangerous, I whispered. I don't care. His voice was fierce, low. I need you to know. Last night, every night, it's you I think about. No one else. Tears burned behind my eyes. Stop, please. I can't, he said. His hand tightened around mine. I tried. I swear I tried. My heart thudded painfully. I wanted to scream at him, push him away, tell him this was wrong. But the truth was a knife twisting inside me. I wanted him too.
The kiss that shouldn't have happened.
When he leaned closer, I didn't move. Couldn't. His breath fanned against my skin, carrying the scent of rain, and something sharp, something reckless. Tell me you don't want this, he whispered. But I couldn't. And so he kissed me. Not gentle this time. Not searching. This kiss was surrender, messy, desperate, full of everything we'd been holding back. My hands clutched his shirt, pulling him closer even as my mind screamed for distance. He broke away just long enough to press his forehead to mine. I can't lose you, he whispered. You never had me. I breathed back, though the lie cracked as it left my lips. Almost discovered. The floorboard outside my room creaked. We froze. My pulse spiked. His hand clamped over my mouth before I could gasp. Footsteps passed. A door closed down the hall. We didn't move until silence swallowed the house again. His hand slid away, lingering on my cheek. My breath shook against his palm. We can't keep risking this, I whispered. And yet, his thumb brushed across my skin. We keep finding each other. The breaking point. He lay down beside me, both of us staring at the ceiling, breaths uneven. The distance between our bodies was barely an inch, but it felt like fire. "Do you hate me for this?" he asked quietly. I closed my eyes. "I hate myself." "Don't," he murmured. "Don't you dare." "I should." "Then hate me instead." His voice cracked, and for the first time I realized he was breaking too. Silence wrapped around us. The storm outside rattled the windows, a mirror to the chaos inside. And in that silence, one truth bled through everything else. We couldn't go back. That night wasn't just another secret. It was the point of no return. Because when he walked into my room, he didn't just cross a line. He erased it. The next morning, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. My lips still tingled from his kiss. My skin still burned where his hands had touched. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the way he looked at me in the dark, haunted, desperate, like I was the only thing keeping him alive. And yet, when I heard voices downstairs, laughter echoing through the house, the weight of what we had done hit me harder than ever. We had crossed a line. There was no undoing it. Pretending. At breakfast, he sat across from me. His hair was damp from a shower, his face composed, calm, almost too calm. He didn't look at me once. I tried to mimic him, shoving food around my plate, nodding when someone asked me a question, pretending everything was fine. But inside I was spiraling. Every time his hand moved, I remembered it on my skin. Every time he spoke, I remembered the way he whispered my name. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I sat there, smiling, pretending like the night before hadn't happened. The close call. Later that day, I slipped into the laundry room to catch my breath. I needed silence, somewhere to fall apart without being seen. But when I turned, he was already there. We stared at each other, the hum of the dryer filling the silence. His jaw tightened. My chest ached. And then, footsteps. The door handle twisted. Panic surged. Without thinking, he pressed me back against the wall, body shielding mine as the door opened. "Hey, you seen?" A voice cut in. A face appeared in the doorway. Curious. He stepped sideways quickly, blocking me from view, voice steady. "No, haven't seen them." A pause. The person lingered, then shrugged and left, door clicking shut. We stayed frozen, my back against the wall, his body still too close. When I finally looked at him, his eyes were burning. "This is insane," I whispered. "Yeah," he breathed. And yet, his hand brushed mine. "We're still here." The question. That night, he came again. Not into my bed this time, but standing in the doorway, shadows hiding most of his face. "You're avoiding me," he said quietly. "I have to." "Why?" I laughed bitterly. "Do you really need me to explain?" He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. His voice was low, steady, but there was something breaking beneath it. "Are you ashamed of me?" The question gutted me. I wanted to say no, to tell him I wasn't, but the truth lodged in my throat. My silence was louder than any confession. His face tightened, pain flashing in his eyes. "I knew it," he whispered. "It's not." My voice shook. "It's not you. It's what this means. It's what it will do to us." He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat of him. "What if I don't care?" His voice cracked. "What if I care more about you than I do about anything else?" My hands trembled at my sides. My chest ached with words I couldn't say. Because I did care. I cared so much it terrified me. But all I whispered was, "Then you'll ruin us both." The heavy silence. He didn't speak after that. Just stood there, eyes locked on mine, waiting for something I couldn't give. And then, without another word, he left. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me in darkness. But even in the silence, I could still feel him everywhere, his voice in my head, his touch on my skin, his kiss on my lips. And I realized with a hollow ache, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't push him away. Days turned into a blur of silence and stolen glances. We barely spoke in front of anyone else, but the air between us was always charged, like static before a storm. Every time he entered a room, I felt it. Every time his eyes brushed mine, I burned. And yet, we acted like strangers. Dinner table tension. One evening, We sat at the dinner table surrounded by family chatter and clinking silverware. My fork scraped my plate, but I couldn't eat. My throat was too tight. He sat diagonally across, pretending to be engrossed in conversation. But under the table, I felt it, his foot brushing mine. Just once, light, almost accidental. My heart stopped. I pulled back instantly, cheeks flaming, terrified someone had noticed. But no one looked up. Laughter carried on. Then he did it again. This time, deliberately. I shot him a glare, silent, desperate. His lips twitched like he was holding back a smile. And I hated him for it, and wanted him more than ever. The slip? Later that night, I was in the kitchen pouring a glass of water when I heard footsteps behind me. Couldn't sleep either? He asked softly. I turned. He was leaning in the doorway, arms crossed, hair tousled, eyes unreadable in the dim light. I'm fine. I lied. He stepped closer. No, you're not. I shook my head. Don't. Not here. But his hand brushed mine as he reached for the glass, lingering far too long. My pulse raced. And then, someone's voice echoed from the staircase. Hey, who's in the kitchen? We froze. I jerked my hand back, shoving the glass into the sink. He quickly turned, grabbing a bottle from the counter like he'd just come for a drink. By the time the person entered the room, yawning, rubbing their eyes, we looked perfectly normal. Two people standing too far apart, pretending we hadn't just been inches from disaster. But I could still feel the heat of his hand on mine. Breaking. That night, I locked myself in my room and finally let the tears come. I couldn't keep doing this. Couldn't live in the constant fear of being caught, of ruining everything. Couldn't keep carrying the guilt and the shame that gnawed at me like a wound that wouldn't heal. And yet, the thought of losing him, of never feeling his touch again, was unbearable. I buried my face in my hands, whispering into the dark. Why can't I stop? His knock. Minutes later, there was a soft knock on my door. I didn't answer. The knock came again, more insistent. Then his voice low, trembling. Please, just open the door. I wanted to scream at him to leave me alone, but I couldn't. My body moved before my mind did, unlocking the door, letting him in. He stepped inside, shutting it quietly behind him. His eyes flicked over my tear-stained face, and something inside him cracked. I can't stand seeing you like this, he whispered. You shouldn't even be here. I know. He swallowed hard. But I can't stay away. I'm losing my mind, and I think you are too. I turned away, shaking. We're destroying each other. Then let me be destroyed with you. The breaking point. I spun on him, voice breaking. Don't you get it? If someone finds out, it's over. Everything will be hated, shunned. We'll lose everything that matters. His jaw clenched, eyes glistening. You think I don't know that? You think I don't wake up every night terrified of the same thing? Then why? I choked out. Why keep doing this? His voice dropped to a whisper, raw, shattered. Because you're the only thing that feels real to me anymore. The words gutted me. And in that moment, I realized it didn't matter how much I tried to fight it. I was already his. The house was silent that night. Too silent. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of everything pressing down on me. My chest felt tight, my hands restless against the sheets. I wanted sleep to take me, to pull me out of this mess for just a few hours. But sleep wouldn't come. And then my door creaked open. I sat up instantly, heart racing. He stood there in the dark, the dim glow of the hallway framing his figure. For a long moment, neither of us moved. You can't be here, I whispered. I know, he said softly, voice trembling. But I had to. The approach. He stepped closer, each movement careful, like he was walking through fire. His eyes never left mine, searching, pleading, as if asking me to push him away. But I didn't. When he reached the edge of my bed, I whispered again, weaker this time, You shouldn't. I tried, he said. His voice cracked. God, I tried. But every night I lie awake, and I hear your voice in my head, and I feel like I'm dying. Tears burned my eyes. We're making a mistake. Maybe, he breathed. His hand trembled as he reached for mine. but it's the only thing that feels right. The surrender. When his fingers brushed mine, I should have pulled back. I should have ended it there. But instead, I let him hold me. The silence between us was thick, heavy, fragile. My pulse thundered in my ears as he leaned closer, breath warm against my skin. And then, in the quietest voice, he whispered, "Tell me to stop, and I will." The room tilted. My lips parted. I wanted to say it. I wanted to scream it. But no words came. And that silence was its own permission. His mouth touched mine, hesitant at first, then desperate, broken, hungry. I melted into him, into the fire I had been fighting for so long. The shame was still there, the fear, the risk, but it was drowned out by the sheer ache of needing him. After, when it was over, we lay in the dark, breathing hard, the world outside forgotten. His hand traced the outline of mine, gentle, trembling. "I don't know what this means," he whispered. "I just know I can't pretend anymore." I turned to face him, eyes wet, throat raw. "We're not supposed to do this." "I know." He smiled faintly, a broken smile. "But we did." The silence after that was crushing, because the truth settled in. There was no going back. The fear. A floorboard creaked outside the door. We froze, hearts pounding, breaths caught. The shadow of footsteps moved down the hall, slow, heavy, and then faded. Neither of us moved until the silence returned. And then he whispered, so soft I almost didn't hear it, "One day, someone's going to find out." I closed my eyes, chest tight, and when they do, his voice was steady, certain, "Then I'll take the blame. Every last piece of it. But I won't regret this. Not tonight. Not ever." The collapse. I didn't sleep. Neither did he. We just lay there, side by side, staring into the darkness. And I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just desire anymore. It wasn't just a mistake we could hide in silence. It was love. Twisted, forbidden, dangerous love. And I knew it would destroy us both. But even as fear coiled in my stomach, even as shame whispered in my ear, one truth remained. I couldn't stop. Morning light is a cruel way of making everything look smaller, duller, and unbearably real. When I opened my eyes, he was still there, lying on his side, watching me like he was afraid I might disappear. For a moment, I let myself believe it was normal, that we were just two people who'd fallen asleep together after a night we wouldn't regret. But then reality hit, and it hit hard. The silence after. We didn't speak much that morning. He slipped out of my room before the house woke, and I sat on my bed staring at the imprint of his body on the sheets, feeling equal parts alive and destroyed. At breakfast, he acted like nothing had happened. His laughter was timed perfectly, his words easy, casual. Anyone looking would never suspect. But I knew, and he knew, and in the silence between us, the weight of what we'd done pressed heavier than ever. Hidden looks. Days passed. We barely spoke when others were around, but when our eyes met across a room, the air thickened instantly. I felt every glance like a spark, every accidental brush of his hand like fire on my skin. We never said the words aloud, but the memory of that night lived in both of us. It lingered in the spaces between conversations, and the pauses too long to be innocent. Still, we didn't let it happen again. Not right away. Maybe we were scared. Maybe we both knew we'd gone too far already. My guilt, I carried it everywhere. The shame, the fear, the constant replay in my head. I asked myself 1,000 times if I would undo it, if I could erase that night and go back to being just what we were supposed to be. But the truth I couldn't say aloud was this. I didn't want to erase it. The guilt lived beside the longing, tangled so tightly I couldn't separate one from the other. Did we talk again? Yes, quietly, carefully. Late at night, when the house slept, we would whisper through cracked doors or stolen moments. Not about the future, never that, just about how it felt, how terrifying it was, how impossible it seemed to stay away from each other now. He once said, voice breaking, "I don't care if it destroys me. I just don't want to lose you." And I wanted to believe him. I wanted to hold on to that promise, like it meant something. But deep down, I knew love like ours couldn't last. Not in the open, not in the light of day.
What happened after?
We kept our secret. For weeks. For months. Maybe longer than either of us expected we could. But secrets have a way of rotting in the dark. The tension only grew heavier, the stares longer, the nights harder to survive without slipping back into each other's arms. Sometimes, I'd wake in the middle of the night and imagine him standing at my door again, and my body would ache with memory. We didn't talk about what would happen if someone found out. We didn't talk about forever. Maybe because we both knew forever wasn't ours to have. Looking back, now when I think about it, my chest tightens with the same mix of heat and sorrow I felt back then. Was it wrong? Yes. Did it break me? Absolutely. Would I change it? I don't know. Some things can't be undone. That night will always live inside me, a memory carved so deep it might as well be part of my skin. Sometimes I wonder if he feels the same, if he still lies awake thinking about the way I looked at him in the dark, about the words we never dared to say aloud. Other times, I wonder if he's buried it completely, if he's moved on and learned to forget. But me? I can't forget. I don't even want to.
Final reflection.
Telling this story feels like confessing a crime, like handing over a piece of myself I swore I'd never let anyone see. But maybe that's why I'm saying it now, because the truth has been burning inside me for too long. He's your brother, they would say, and they'd be right. That's the part I'll never escape. But the other truth, the one I'll carry to my grave, is this. For one night, he wasn't just my brother. He was everything I ever wanted and everything I could never have. And no matter how much it broke me, I couldn't stop. If you made it this far, I want to ask you something. What's the one word that comes to your mind after hearing this story? Is it confused? Heartbroken? Exposed? Or maybe something you can't even name? Type that word in the comments below. I want to see how this made you feel. And if you've ever carried a secret like mine, something you've never told anyone, share it. You're not alone here. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one.